Right, good morning, everyone. So I'm doing this solo again now, so hopefully this is all fine. So, yes, YouGov dropped another large MRP poll yesterday. We've had a couple of MRP polls published this week. We had the one from Survation, and yesterday we had the one from YouGov. Now, the particularly useful thing about the YouGov one is, first of all, I tend to credit YouGov higher because for the last two general elections they've been quite accurate. However, the other benefit of this YouGov one is that it shows a direction of travel. Because the Survation one's just a snapshot, but now the YouGov one is... we had one where the fieldwork was done over December 2023. The poll was published in January, but the fieldwork was done in December. And now we've had one released in April where the fieldwork was done over March. So we've got two polls by the same pollster using the same methodology that tracks the difference across 3 months. I'll just go over the headline results here before we look at some of the details, because what is interesting is the fact that the Conservatives are in a worse place over those 3 months. Things are getting worse for them, which makes you think, oh, so they plan on waiting another 8 or 9 months for the election. Good luck with that. But the headline results are that, the results as YouGov state them would have Labour on 403 seats, the Conservatives on 155, the Lib Dems on 49, SNP on 19, applied for, Greens 1, Reform UK none. In fact, actually, there was someone complaining yesterday after the poll going, oh, this looks like the Lib Dems would win 49 seats and Reform UK would win no seats, and they both got the same share of the vote. And it's like, yeah, that's first past the post for you. If you don't like it, change it, right? So, it could be quite interesting when we're sort of focusing on electoral reform. It's not necessarily just a case of wanting Labour to do it, for which I keep saying there is a lot of support within Labour for it. We may find that there are plenty of voices on the right who want it as well. We may find there are not. Because although it would help Reform UK, it depends what they want to do. If they want to be a proper political party, then yeah, they need electoral reform, same as any other small party. But if all they want to do is cause trouble for the Conservatives, then no, they will want PR like they want a hole in the head. Can't see the Tories getting 155, more like 55. Well, shall we have a look then? Because it's funny you should say that. Let us... There we go. So this isn't... If you go on to... I've put a link in the description below for the poll, and you can get the data tables. This isn't the... I've combined the December and March results from YouGov and applied a few little calculations myself. So if I click on my vulnerability tab... what I've got here, I've ranked the seats in order of Conservative lead. So if we go down, so although the poll says, oh, the Conservatives would win 155 seats, right? So if you look, though, it's like, okay, but there's some of them where they win by a small margin. Like if you look here, there's quite a lot of seats where they're only expected to win by up to 5 points. So actually there's only 83. So out of 155 seats, there's 83 seats where they'd be expected to win it by a margin of more than 5%. Now, right now, if you're looking at if your Conservative MPs looking at this, and they're like James Cleverly, for example, Braintree, right? It reckons he's sitting on a 5% lead. He's sitting on a 5% lead. And he will say, he might feel comfortable at the moment, but the lead is going down all the time. So if I go back to where the leads were. So in December, the Conservatives were on 26% of the share of the vote. So the MRP poll from December said the Conservatives will win 26% of the vote. Now it is saying 24%. So it's gone down in 3 months. So think how much further it'll go down in 8 months. All of a sudden, James Cleverly doesn't look all that clever. And in fact, Reform UK, you can see, Reform UK are on, oh, you see, it's quite small. I'll read it out to you. Reform UK are on 18%. So that means this is a constituency where Reform UK are particularly attractive to voters. So if you imagine that they carry on and Reform UK carry on eating into that lead, and tactical voting, because if you're a progressive voter in a safe Tory seat and you've got the chance to get rid of the Home Secretary who has been pushing the Rwanda plan, I mean, the Rwanda plan works against James Cleverly both ways, really, if you think about it. First of all, it's not going to do anything useful. The Rwanda plan, doesn't matter what happens, it helps Reform UK. If the Rwanda bill doesn't pass through Parliament, helps Reform UK. It doesn't matter that Rishi Sunak will blame Labour peers in the House of Lords. That doesn't hurt Reform UK, right? If the bill passes but doesn't do anything, and it won't do anything to channel crossing numbers, then, you know, he's got what he wanted, but he's still failed by Reform UK's measures. So Reform UK are sitting pretty on the Rwanda plan. Rishi Sunak's Rwanda bill is an absolute boon for them. So it's quite likely Reform UK will carry on eating into this lead. But then also, you know, if you've got people who are prepared to vote tactically to get rid of the Home Secretary who brought the Rwanda plan, as well as a few other things that we don't really like, then they're not far off. You know, Reform UK nick a couple of points from the Conservatives, and they've got, what, 7 or 8 months to do it? If this election's going to be in autumn, they've got 7 or 8 months to do it. And Labour, because the benefit of Braintree, sometimes it's not clear who the tactical vote is. Here it's really clear. Labour are just behind. The Lib Dems and the Greens are nowhere. So, you know, Labour increased their share of the vote from tactical voting. He's gone. James Cleverly's gone. Absolutely gone. And there's loads of seats like that. There's like 70 seats like that in that position that they could lose. So, yeah, this 155 could easily turn into about 80. And then, you know, I mean, I say anything within 5% is vulnerable. But if the Tory vote share keeps dropping, because we don't know where the floor is. We don't know where the floor of Tory support is. It could be, they could still be able to dig a lot further down. But anyway, I'll catch up with some comments. The longer they leave it, the worse the drubbing will be. That is precisely what I think. If you read reports about, you know, various correspondents talking to Tory MPs, they think things will help them. They think things will get better. Now, what is it that they think will get better? They mostly talk about inflation getting lower and interest rates coming down. So let's look at both of those. Inflation going lower. Actually, in the 3 months between these two YouGov polls, inflation dropped quite a bit. And yet the Tories still lost vote share. So there doesn't seem to be any sensible basis for Tory MPs to suppose that lower inflation will help them. Because in actual fact, inflation's already now getting close to target. So there isn't a lot further inflation can fall in the next 8 months, say. And if, you know, when it did drop quite suddenly over this winter. If that hasn't helped the Tories polling, then why would it drop in a small amount over the next 8 months? Then interest rates, because that's they're thinking, oh, if interest rates fall, the mortgages are cheaper. No, they're not. They're more expensive still. And that is because, let us imagine, so let's say between now and July, interest rates fall by 1%. You can't really hope for more than that. Let's say they fall by 1%. Might not even do that. And then someone is renewing their fixed rate term for their mortgage in August, say. Well, the Tories can argue that because the interest rate has dropped, it's cheaper than it would have been, but it's still going up. You might have someone who's got like a £500 repayment at the moment. They're paying £500 a month for their mortgage. And then in August, they're going to be paying £700. Now, it's all right, Tories saying, oh, yeah, but it would have been £730 if it weren't for this interest rate drop. It's like, yeah, but it's still costing me 200 quid more. And I don't think they understand that. They don't understand that interest rate, because interest rates will not fall down to or anywhere near to the level they were when people were taking out these fixed rate terms a few years ago, because they just fundamentally don't realise that. They're failing to take account of the fact that it doesn't matter if interest rates come down. People are still going to be paying more for their mortgage and paying more for their rent. Could Sunak change the law to allow a May 2nd election with zero campaign time? Is what I'm wondering, if it would limit tactical votes against them and limit people voting. Rishi Sunak can't, no. Parliament can. Parliament can do what it likes to our electoral system. But Parliament would not vote for that. So he wouldn't be able to now. Sunak cannot do it just as a member of the government. That would require, if there's going to be any change at all to the circumstances around this election, which there have been. Remember, there are some things that are going to affect the election and things that will affect this poll. So voter ID is the big one. You know, we had a lot of people turned away last year in the local elections with voter ID who didn't realise they needed it. Now, you could hope that news of this would spread and more people, particularly after the local elections this year as well, more people will be tuned into the fact that they need voter ID. However, what if it doesn't? There could still be a lot of people who try, because this poll can take account of lots of things. It cannot take account of voter ID because there's no past data. It can take account of people who say they're going to vote a particular way and then don't, because you get some of that. So they've got past data they can judge the likelihood of someone voting a particular way and the likelihood of them voting at all. Because there'll be loads of people. If you look at the breakdown of results, it always shows a way higher percentage of young people voting than actually vote. So you can account for that because you've got data. There's no data on people who say they intend to vote but not being able to because they get turned away at the polling station. So how large a factor that is, don't know. The other thing that it can't really do is take account of the fact, because again, this is new, all those millions of people who, you know, British immigrants abroad who previously were not allowed to vote in the general election because they've left the country too long ago. Now they can. Now they will be able to. We do not know what the impact of that will be. The Tories are trying to turn that to their advantage by harvesting a load of proxy votes. I don't know how successful they'll be. But it could work the other way. It could be that a load of British immigrants abroad decide to vote against the Conservatives for screwing them over with Brexit or something. Who knows? Vincent talking there about, we'll just do this as a little side thing, because again, I always pick out Labour misinformation. Considered voting independent since the Labour Party refused to support calls to stop arms to Israel. That's where you're wrong. David Lammy has twice now said that the government should publish their legal advice, because if the legal advice says that these weapons are being used against civilians, then legally we have to stop those arms sales. So it's not Labour's position at all that they are defending the sale of arms. What they are saying is that the law should be followed. So what they're saying is, if the legal advice is that Israel aren't doing anything wrong, which is about as likely as the Tories winning the next election, then there's no issue with those arms sales, because a lot of people's jobs depend on them. But David Lammy has been pushing, and for some time, you may not have heard it, but David Lammy has been writing letters to David Cameron saying, what's the legal advice? What's the legal advice? You know, you need to tell Parliament. And he has again recently just said, given the Alicia Kearns, who's the head of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee, she claims she has heard that David Cameron has received legal advice that Israel is in breach of international law. So David Lammy has gone on it again. So yeah, it's absolutely not true. What Labour are doing is just putting in the usual caveats. I mean, don't get me wrong. I would have, I would stop all private arms sales anyway, because at the end of the day, if you're going to sell arms abroad, they're inevitably going to end up in the hands of people who want to use them, and and they'll generally be used against civilians. So there it is. But the other thing as well is, let's say you did have some particular issue with Labour and you say, oh, let's vote for an independent then. It's like, you're just helping the Tories. Because that's the thing. There are people who think, oh, this lead that Labour could get, it's too big, it's not good for democracy. And yeah, in isolation, absolutely. But Labour are not competing with other progressive parties. There's like a seat where Labour and the Lib Dems, because of the nature of this election, there might be like 2 or 3. I haven't actually checked that yet. But Labour are competing against the Conservatives. If you look at where the Labour gains will be, it's where the Conservatives... In fact, if I put Labour... So let's do it by... Is this... I'm just checking that I'm getting the right thing here. Yeah, Labour leads. Largest to smallest. So if I go down, obviously no one's taking these ones. Liverpool, Riverside, 72%, right? But if we go down to the vulnerable ones for Labour, if we go down to where Labour are vulnerable, so they're 5%. Closest Conservative, Oh no, SNP, that's an SNP one, do what you like. Conservative, SNP, Conservative, SNP, Conservative. It's the Conservatives almost everywhere. Richard, £20 super chat, thank you very much, says, the number of Tories that say that the cost of living is getting better because inflation is falling, that boggles the mind. They're mad. They're utterly mad. Sorry, I have just had a warning if people are mentioning this about the bit rate. I don't know what that's about. But I never had that problem on my own streams. I don't know what this is about. But sorry, there's not a lot I can do about that. Who's moderating this? There's no moderating, I'm afraid. So behave yourselves. So Lammy's not the only Labour spokesman. Yeah, he is. On foreign affairs, he's the Labour spokesman. That's how it works. And indeed, you would think that any sort of Labour supporter understands division of labour. He is the shadow foreign secretary. He talks for Labour on foreign affairs. Your polling card says that expired photographic identification is expired. It will still be accepted as long as the photograph is a good likeness. Yes, but what I would say is not all photo ID covers. So you have to make sure it's still the right photo ID. And what I would still say is, do you really want to go along and have some Jobsworth say, I'm not sure this is a good likeness for you? Because a lot of people, photographs aren't brilliant likeness because you've changed your hairstyle or something. Do you really want to trust someone whose eyesight may not be all that great, for example, or who's just a bit of a Jobsworth, a bit pernickety? Do you really want to risk it? I would say get valid voter ID. Don't lean on this, oh yeah, if it's a driving license that's expired, but no, get yourself a valid photo ID. If you don't have the passport or you don't have the driving license, you can get from the council voter ID. You shouldn't have to pay for it. So everyone should be able to get that. Get it nice and early. And if you know anyone who's in that position, get them to do it as well. And the key thing is make sure you carry it with you. Like, not your passport. Don't habitually carry your passport around with you, but carry it with you. Because even if you get the photo ID, the valid photo ID, what we know from past pilots is if people go to the polling station, they've forgotten it, so then they're not allowed to vote. What you generally find is a good third of those people, I can't remember if it's a third will go back or a third won't go back, but there's a good chunk of those people, even if they have the ID at home, will not go home, get it and come back again. So it's also a case of so that's why the passport's not great either, because you wouldn't carry a passport around with you every day. Whereas, I carry, I have a wallet, my driving license is in there. So even if I weren't expecting to need it, it would always be with me. I always take my wallet when I'm going out, and my driving license is always in it. So that you could do the same for the council issued voter ID. Just keep it in your wallet. Just have it with you, so it's always there when you go out. So you're in the habit of, so you don't have to remember to take it then. It's done. They say the problem is Pat McFadden and Darren Jones have spoken authoritatively about Israel being an ally when questioned. They can be an ally in some cases and not in others. It says poor party discipline. It's not poor party discipline. They're just making sure that they put their position. The position is really this simple. There are a lot of people who just want Israel destroyed, right? And they're in on this, and they're muddying all the waters. They don't want arms being supplied to Israel for defence or attack. Whereas the government position and Labour's position is, look, if you're going to have an arms industry, you're going to sell them. You just make sure that they're not going to be sold to be used illegally, which is why there is a law. It's not up to the government. There is a law that says if the government get legal advice that any country that we're exporting arms to is using them illegally, particularly against civilians, then the law says that the government have to suspend those sales. So what David Cameron is doing here, and he was questioned yesterday for those who don't know, and he was asked about this, and he says he can't remember every bit of paper. Now, this is weak, because you can definitely remember legal advice on what is the most important foreign policy issue at the moment. As far as the country is concerned, anyway, it may not be his priority, but it is the most important as far as the country is concerned. If Alicia Kearns is correct, and certainly David Cameron did not give the impression she's not correct, if David Cameron has seen that advice and he's ignored it, then the government are breaking the law. It doesn't matter that the government haven't published the advice. If they've received that advice... Now, I can understand receiving some advice and going, oh, but opinions divided. Like some government lawyers think, yeah, this is dodgy. Some government lawyers think, well, there's not enough evidence. That's different. But if he's had, a properly formed legal opinion from the government lawyers, and let's be honest, we've seen the evidence anyway, it wouldn't be a surprise, then the government are breaking the law. And Labour's position are that they should publish that advice. And Labour know full well that if that advice is published and it says what Kearns is claiming it says, then actually the arms sales will be suspended, because they have to be by law. But anyway, there we go. Right. When are the Skivers back in Parliament for PMQs? Not until week after next. So Parliament returns from the 15th of April. But don't expect very much to happen then. I mean, PMQs will now be basically Keir Starmer saying, when's the election? Gives us election. Gives election. Go on, gives election. Because it's in Labour's interests for voters, because voters do want a general election. Polling shows they want a general election. When Rishi Sunak appeared on local radio in the Northeast, when was it? I think it might be Monday or Tuesday. They said that they'd asked, because who was going to appear on like this Tees radio thing, and they'd asked for questions from the public, and they said the number one question from the public was, when's the election? And Rishi Sunak keeps saying, oh, the public aren't asking for election, they don't want an election. And they said, no, literally the public are asking for election here. And he still insisted that the public aren't asking him for an election. But so Labour want voters to not just want an election, but to be annoyed that Rishi Sunak isn't granting it. Because Rishi Sunak is not giving any good reason for not calling an election for this May. If think about his reasoning, he first of all says that the public are asking for it. Yes, they are. Polling shows that the public wants a general election this May. This phone-in, I mean, okay, that's one part of the country, but nonetheless, the most popular question was, when's the election? And the other thing is, Rishi Sunak was saying this week, which is a really stupid thing to say. He says, I'll call the election when people start to feel things are getting better. So he's basically admitting that he's going to call the election when it suits him, not when it suits the public. Now, we know they do that anyway. That is the whole point of Parliament being able to, that's why we don't have fixed parliaments. Even when we had the Fixed Terms Parliament Act, we never had fixed parliaments. Parliament can vote for an early election whenever it likes. And in fact, actually, now it's gone back to the government can call the election whenever it likes. So we understand if you give the government the power to call the election, they're going to do it when it suits them. But, that's the quiet part. You're not supposed to say it out loud. And also, when are people going to start feeling better? I don't think they are. The Tories think that the economic situation will look better in autumn. But in autumn, even if that's true, and I'm not convinced, but even if it is true, let's say it is, that is also the time when people are more conscious of energy bills, isn't it? So, it's this time when people start to put on the heating or have the lights on for longer because it's darker. So it's a naturally more pessimistic time. Does Rishi, I think that is, live in his own reality committed to his delusion? I think he does, but I also think there is a certain extent to which Rishi Sunak, because Rishi Sunak will be getting advice. If I can look at polling and go, yeah, autumn election is not going to be great for you, Rishi Sunak's definitely getting that advice, but it's what he's telling his MPs. So what Rishi Sunak, for example, according to reports, has said to his MPs, there's some, never mind the published polls. Our internal polling says there are some red wall seats we could still win. This is not the case. It was the case a couple of years ago. It's not the case now. So Rishi Sunak's lying. We know he's lying to his MPs because we're getting from MPs what Rishi Sunak's telling them about the election strategy. And we know it's not true. Now, at the end of the day, Tory MPs should pay a bit more attention themselves. But Rishi Sunak is definitely, he is deluded on certain things, but also he is also lying to his MPs because he doesn't want them to trigger a, a leadership contest. They don't want to oust him because that does him no good at all. So what will be interesting is the local elections. How badly do Tory MPs think the local elections are going to be? What is the point at which it's worse than expected? I imagine the main result to watch out for would be West Midlands Mayor Andy Street, because the Tories have got 2 mayors up for election. There's a load of new seats as well that they could win. Well, I say seats, I mean positions, should we say? But the Tees Valley mayor is probably going to lose. They should lose. But the West Midlands one, Andy Street, would still be favourite to win that. Win that. So if Labour can win that, that I think would represent a worse than expected result for the Tories. But I'm not sure in terms of how many councillors. They can't lose 1,000 councillors this year because they haven't got 1,000 councillors. There's not as many councils up for grabs this year as last year. So the Tories have just under 1,000. So they could lose half of them. That would be interesting. Conservative Party very good at isolating their leaders. Well, they're usually very good at managing these things. But at the moment, they're not. I don't think we can judge the current Conservatives by the standards of previous Conservative parliaments. And I think partly that is because it's a very different parliament. I mean, if you think about it, in 2019, they had this huge influx of MPs who were not normal Tory MPs. They were like candidates in seats the Tories don't traditionally expect to win. So, so very different people, the likes of Jonathan Gullis and Brendan Clark-Smith and Lee Anderson. Very different types of Conservative MP. So it's fundamentally changed the focus. But then also Boris Johnson getting rid of about 20 traditional Tory MPs, shall we say, ones who were a bit clued in. So Boris Johnson and Brexit created a Conservative parliamentary party that is unable to openly discuss things like properly, frankly. So even behind closed doors, they can't really have conversations about things that cross certain red lines. So it's like they've created a parliamentary party that has to remain deluded. It has to either believe in the delusions or pretend it believes in the delusions. So the Tories have turned themselves into a dystopian enemy of themselves. But there we go. And we thought Clegg got it good after, 2015. I think you mean wait for Rishi. Well, I mean, these results here, they are absolutely incredible, really. It's the direction of travel. It's the direction of travel with them. They are, I mean, they're just not... For the Conservatives, these are absolutely dreadful results. Again, if I look at the change, they had 26% of the vote share in December, 24% in March. And March, like spring, people tend to be more optimistic naturally in spring, don't they? Inflation has been falling. The government have been announcing tax cuts. The field work for this latest polling was done after the tax cuts were announced. So... this is after their tax cut, after 2 rounds of tax cuts being announced, after inflation's been falling, and yet the Conservative vote share is still falling. And the Reform UK vote share has increased. It's gone from 9% to 12%, according to this. And that is that's directly eating into the Conservatives' vote share. Labour's vote share has gone up again as well. So it's basically like a 4 or 5% gap has opened up between Labour and the Conservatives, really. And you think to yourself, maybe the Conservatives are close to their floor. Maybe over 8 months they're not going to lose that much more vote share, but maybe they will, because we don't know that they have a floor. But anyway, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you very much for coming on, everyone. I'll be on again tomorrow morning with a different topic. It may well be this latest thing of Rishi Sunak's about the ECHR. We will see. Have a very good day, and until next time, I'll see you later.